And as this all unfolds, I'm going to bring back our Mercedes Stevenson now, who is standing by in Ottawa. Mercedes, we know that this is all taking place south of the border, but many people here in Canada watching what happens because there's no question that whatever happens in the United States has huge impacts here in Canada. It also means some changes to our relationship with our friends to the south. So let's talk about that first. How are things going to change?
Well, this will certainly be an easier government for the Trudeau Liberals to find common ground with. Democrats and Liberals are naturally both center-left on the spectrum, and that is going to show alignment. On top of that, you have the personal relationship that exists not only between President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, which was established largely when Biden was President Obama's vice president, and they had a very, very warm relationship. It was exceptional. You don't see that very often on the global stage. So we expect that to continue. But there was also friendships and close relationships that were established by senior staff. And I think people underestimate the role that can play in political success, is who is talking to someone, who is influencing them. So certainly there'll be a lot of familiar places coming back. That said, how will things change? Well, you're going to see less reactionary stances by the government of Canada. And I don't mean extreme when I say reactionary. I mean having to react to something that just happened that they weren't expecting. Because with President Trump, you never knew what bomb was going to drop on Twitter, when he would attack the prime minister, when he would suddenly in the middle of the night decide to launch some scathing attack, or, for example, decide to implement steel and aluminum tariffs under a national security exemption. So there's a lot of things there that are simply just going to become more stable, more friendly, and more common ground. But that, of course, doesn't mean that there won't be challenges ahead, too.
There is no question that there's certainly that trickle effect in terms of what happens in the United States. And we saw, what happened 2 weeks ago at the Capitol with those riots and what that all incited and the movements that happened across the country there. That was echoed in some smaller way up here in Canada as well. Do you think that all just ends now with Donald Trump leaving office, or what do you think we'll see here in terms of the sentiment north of the border?
Well, it's a good question, Tracy. I mean, I don't think we ever saw it here at the same level as in the United States. I mean, there weren't people trying to surround Parliament. It's a different system. It's a different political culture. But that said, whatever happens in the United States in their politics tends to seep up into Canada. And we have seen increasing concern about extremist right-wing groups, white supremacist organizations, the QAnon conspiracy, MAGA people in Canada, even though they're not in the United States. But it's not been as extreme. So the question is, does what Donald Trump created stay on? How much of this will vanish now that he is no longer the president? And I think part of that question goes to two factors. Number one, what does Donald Trump do now? Does he try to stay on? Does he, if he is not impeached, for a second time, try to run again? Does he try to establish his own political party, which he was talking about? Does he try to go become a governor somewhere, or does he call it a day and go back to business, which would likely decrease the influence? The other question is how senior Republicans react to him. And so far, his political circle of support has been shrinking pretty rapidly. People have been walking away. They've been disavowing him. And I think there's a real question about how the Republican Party handles this. And based on that, how much influence Trump will have. There will still be the hardcore Trumpers who are following Donald Trump because he's Donald Trump. But for a lot of the Republican Party, they may be trying to reset the agenda and refocus because they no longer want that association. And that could really shrink his influence when you don't have prominent congresspeople and senators speaking out and encouraging the kinds of things that the president was.
Mercedes, you touched on the Liberal government perhaps having better or easier ties with Democrats. We did speak about the specific Joe Biden-Justin Trudeau relationship, but how are Canadian lawmakers feeling about this day? Is it something that they've been waiting for? Are they more hopeful about the next 4 years?
I think right or left, you will not find a lot of Canadian politicians who liked the Trump administration, who supported it. It was seen as difficult for Canada, unfair, that we suffered tariffs under the U.S. government on things like steel and aluminum. The whole China relationship, where we have had 2 Canadians behind bars, unjustly detained by the Chinese government in retribution for the arrest of Meng Wanzhou on what was an American warrant here in Canada, and Donald Trump then turning around and essentially using that as a bargaining chip with China. And these are two Canadians' lives. So I think that you're going to see it easier there. That said, there's a lot of concern about Keystone XL. The fact that this was canceled on day one, I think you're going to see a number of politicians who are not happy about that on both sides of the political spectrum here. The China thing will continue to be a big concern. What is Biden's relationship going to look like with the Chinese government? He's traditionally been more friendly to China than Trump. Does that mean he might drop the extradition request for Meng Wanzhou and the two Canadians will be released? Or is he going to be less hard on China and they stay in longer? We don't have the answers to that. But I think at the end of the day, most Canadian politicians would rather take a Biden presidency who they think they can negotiate with and talk to over the uncertainty of the Trump presidency, and certainly the kind of extremism that he was encouraging at the end of his mandate, which was deeply concerning to Canadian politicians, and it was universally condemned right and left up here.
Okay, Mercedes, thank you so much for your insight. Mercedes Stevenson is joining us from Ottawa today.